Trapped by the belief that I'm not good enough, bound by the limitations and the lies that consumed my world, this was me. It wasn't until I took the biggest leap in my life to know and trust the power within. And it was at that moment I made a choice. My past will not define me anymore. Hello, I am Teri, and I know I am not alone in this. Over the years, I have found that the number one mistake that we make is that we get in the way of our own success story. Yes, I said it. On this show, together we'll tackle limiting beliefs, self-sabotage, getting stuck, fear, doubt, overwhelm, and the imposter syndrome. Join us on this journey designed to transport you beyond your limitations to a world where anything is possible. This is Talking with Teri. Hello, and welcome back to Talking with Teri, where we have powerful conversations to transform your life and your business. And I am so excited today for our guest today. She's the owner, she's a coach, she's a no-nonsense coach. She's a coach. Coach Kathy Wilson is here with us. She's a former collegiate and professional basketball player.
Yes.
She's worked with Fortune 100 and 500 companies, including McGraw-Hill Companies. And I mean, as I scroll through her entire bio, 17 minutes later, we are now here. So I'm just telling you, she's this incredible rock star with us today. So Coach Kathy, welcome.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. I hear that and I'm like, who's she talking about? But I guess that is me.
I know, like the scroll goes on, but I'm excited to hear from you. I can't wait to hear about your basketball career too. Like, how cool is that? But I also want to hear about, how you got to be where you're at today. So if you can just kind of give the listeners a little bit of kind of back history for the folks that haven't gone and stalked you yet. Let's bring them up to speed.
So there's I think a non-professional and a professional piece of this. And the non-professional piece is I have always been someone who everybody comes to for advice. I can be in the grocery store line, on the train. I can act like I am super busy and somebody will tell me or feel compelled to tell me their life story. I can remember a time when I had a debt collector calling me and I was actually giving the debt collector marriage advice. And one of my friends was like, have you ever been married? And I'm like, well, no. Don't even ask me how that happened. But at some point when I was coaching basketball, I knew that I didn't want that to be my full-time career. I was wondering, what do I love to do? And I love to see people succeed. I do. I love to empower them to take pieces of information that I've given and go off and do amazing things. And I was like, I wonder if you could make a career out of that. And that's where I found the coaching program at George Washington University, went through that, started my own business, integrated some training and consulting in that. So I did a lot of work coaching, training, consulting in organizations. And then where I really started feeling that love was with women. I wanted to work with women. So I stopped the corporate stuff and have been working strictly with women. I do work with women in organizations, coaching them, but outside of that, really coaching women to transform their lives and step up to that next level. So that's the long of it.
Yeah. So in your life journey here, what has been some of your biggest challenge and barriers that you've had to overcome?
So I just will be very honest, and this is not anything political, but one of the biggest was overcoming being a Black woman. Yeah. And I know that sounds odd, but my parents are 2 generations separated from me. So they actually grew up in an era where they didn't have opportunities. Things were still segregated. They couldn't vote. All of these things were going on when they were growing up. And so when they raised me, the messages that I received were that, people always thought less of me because of the color of my skin. And I had to work twice as hard to get half as much. And they didn't do this on purpose. They were doing this to protect me and to prepare me, even though the world had changed a little bit, maybe not as much as they would have liked. But I grew up with that. And I believe, and I didn't even know how heavily I carried it with me because I've always been pretty optimistic about I can do anything I want. But I remember taking a course for an archetype training, and I was asking the instructor, what if people won't listen to my message because of the color of my skin? And she was coming from a standpoint of, but you just show up as you, right? You've got this energy. They will listen. And I couldn't get out of that story that
Yeah.
limiting story. And I heard myself. It's almost like I had an out of body experience at that moment. And I was like, I hear it. I hear
Um,
my limiting story. So
yeah.
that has been my biggest hurdle to overcome in my career, is
Yeah.
recognizing, not first and foremost, that that was there because I didn't even see
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
And then having to get over it. The other, we always have the mindset challenges, but if you talk about
Yeah.
a big hurdle, that was it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I
Yeah.
think a lot of people can relate on a lot of different levels. And maybe it's
Yes.
not the color of our skin. Maybe it's, whatever those messages that we received, I grew up with this learning disability, and it was, I mean, it haunted me. And I
Mm.
had the same messages, that it
Yep.
was like, I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. Who am I? And it got reinforced. And there is something to it when that message, that story gets reinforced 24/7. And like, it's
Yes.
almost like we have no control of it or power of it, because it wasn't me. It wasn't me going, I'm like, I had, like, it wasn't you saying, you know what, I have an issue with my color of my skin, right? Like,
Yes.
it's everybody else telling us who we are, what we
Yes.
are. And
Yes.
but when we are being faced with that day in and day out, it's not, we cannot ignore it. It becomes this fabric. And so, talking about the power, and when I talk to people, I'm like, talking about the power of our words and
Oh
what
my
we're
goodness.
saying, not only internally. I was on an interview yesterday, and I was like, not only internally, but what we were saying out to the world, because I said, we have a responsibility with our words. And I truly believe that.
Yes, we do. I do too.
And I think that, like, as parents, as colleagues, I mean, I truly, and some of your background that I was reading up on you, I think you can relate to this. It's like those messages, those words that were given to us was just that. They were not
Hmm.
ours. They
They're
were
not ours.
given to us by accident, on purposefully, unconsciously, whatever that
Mhm.
that story might have been. But then we hold on to that. And then, of course, like, our brains actually goes and seeks out the evidence. And it's like, well, it's true. That teacher just discriminated against me because of the color of my skin. I know it because she did this, that
Yes.
person just said that I was not competent enough because I couldn't get up and give a speech because the way I spoke my words came out all jumbled and whatever.
Yep.
Or that person, whatever that might be, right? And so I think it's so powerful, and I want people to hear this because
It is.
it is it's I think, again, when we have that awareness, right? Awareness is key in anything,
Yeah.
but when we have that awareness of those messages that show up for us, it's really powerful.
Yeah. And I think it's important for us. I mean, you said something so powerful. And I think it's important to reiterate the fact that they were given to us, right? We were like these small little computers that had no software, and we were programmed from a very early age.
Yeah.
We often beat ourselves up as women because we're just like, what's wrong with me? Why can't I do this? Why can't I advance here? Why don't I do this? And we
Yeah.
don't even recognize how we were programmed as young kids, and we had no
Mhm.
choice in that. And there are a lot of things that we outgrow. We outgrow our baby clothes. We don't eat baby food anymore. We don't play with
Yeah.
Barbies, but we don't outgrow that programming
Yeah.
unless we consciously recognize what was given to us and what we have now taken on as our identity. We don't outgrow that
Yeah.
until we recognize it, and then we have to shed it. And it's
Yeah.
almost like, depending on how deeply we are ingrained in that, it's almost like, who am I without this? Like, I have justified and created so much of my life around this belief. If I
Yeah.
let go of that, then what does that say about me? Like, who am I? Was I wrong about that? Like,
Mhm.
it's almost like I've missed all these opportunities because I said that was true.
Yeah.
So it's a reckoning of
It is like
sorts for us.
and it's almost like that there's a grief process. And I want people to be aware that when we go through that shedding process that you were talking about, like, there's a grief process that comes along with it.
Yes.
I remember, so I was a therapist for 25 years prior to doing the work that I'm doing now. And as a therapist, you always use the onion metaphor, right? Like, it's like peeling
Yeah.
back the onion, peeling back the onion. Well, and I truly believe that when we peel back the onion far enough, and I have this fantastic picture of an onion that was given to me by a good friend of mine, and he had cut through the onion, and inside the
Yeah.
onion was actually a heart. And I was like, oh, it's so
Oh,
beautiful. It's just such a beautiful metaphor because it's like peeling back the onion, and what is really in the middle of the onion is,
yeah.
I think, is self-love, right? It's self-love. It's self, because when we have self-love, we can give from our, love, right? Love radiates
Mhm.
out. So if you look back at the onion and you have a heart in it and it radiates out, it's like, oh, love can radiate back out, right? When we are
Yes.
full and complete and whole and complete, it
And
can
love for
radiate back out.
ourselves first, right? Love for
Yes.
ourselves first, and
Yeah.
acceptance of
Yeah.
who we are, and an acceptance of the fact that everything that we were given is
Hmm.
put there to help us fulfill our purpose,
Yes.
regardless of what the world tells us about it. We were created uniquely because we have a unique purpose in this life. And so some of the stuff that we try to get rid of or push aside or deny about ourselves, we're actually denying the gifts that we were given in order to show up in the world as who we were meant to be.
Yes.
And being able to embrace all that and love all that is the first step to being able to step into your power and really create the impact in the world that you desire.
Yeah, I love how you said that, because you're absolutely right. It's like those are the gifts that we were given for whatever
Hmm.
reason to get us to this place right now. If
Yeah.
you did not have these challenges and barriers that you had to overcome, you may not be where you're at today, sending this beautiful message out to having a bigger impact on your audiences, on your clients, on your colleagues, on your friends, or your family. Like, right? Like, I
Yep.
truly believe all
You
of this.
can't
And I
pick
think,
and choose what squares you want to put in the quilt, right?
yes.
It's the whole quilt keeps you warm. That's what keeps you
Yeah.
warm. If you take out all the bad stuff or all the things that you don't necessarily like, you get a holy quilt. That's what I always
Yeah.
say. And who wants a holy quilt? It's
No one with a
useless.
holy quilt. It doesn't keep you up
No,
at night, right? It's not
it
snugly.
does not.
It's not the burrito. It's not the burrito blanket, right?
Right, right.
My daughter just got a burrito blanket, and I'm like, what has happened?
I just
um,
bought blanket hoodies for
yes,
my daughter, a few of her friends, and me and my girlfriends. We've got these big blanket hoodies. Love
I
those,
love
by
it.
the way.
I love it. Well, and again, going back to this like piece of like, when we go through those layers, right?
Mhm.
There's a grief and grieving process, because you're right, because it's like, who would I have been if I didn't do this? And if we just sit for a moment and say, what if everything that was gifted to us, given to us, was
Mm.
serving a higher purpose for us in the longer term? And of
Yeah.
course, like, when we look back, we can say, okay, it's 2020 vision, where we can say, okay, that makes sense. We can it's easier for us to, look back and connect the dots than it is looking forward to trying to connect the dots. Right. And so I
Right.
think that, giving ourselves some grace, but there is a process of grieving. And I remember when I was going through my own grieving process, because I'm like, man, what would have done? And now I have such gratitude from just all the craziness that I experienced through my life. I mean,
Yeah.
from abuse to just,
Mm.
the emotional, like, turmoil that I was put through, like, even just being, I was held back in second grade, and I was
Okay.
so ashamed by that, because it was because I had this learning disability, and there was so much shame to that. I mean,
Mm.
and I carried it through. I wouldn't even tell people how old I was when I just got out
Yeah.
of high school, because I was a year older, right?
Okay.
And there was just so much shame. And so now I'm like, gosh, and I share that story actually for the first time in a speaking event like 3 years ago. And I had two students come from this university come up to me afterwards, and just, they thanked me for it, and they started crying, and they said, I'm in the same boat, and there's so much. And I was like, and I think sometimes we can take our story and it becomes a gift to somebody else, and this says, wow,
I
Coach Kathy did this, and Coach Kathy was able to do this, and like, I can be like Coach Kathy, like, I just think that that's the power in the message that we have. So our mess becomes our message, and
yes.
there's power in impact, right?
Well, I will tell you that that hits home because part of my journey, when you believe that the world is telling you that you're not good enough, that you're never going to succeed, you've got some self-hatred there. And that's a strong word, but you don't love yourself, right?
Yeah.
And I became bulimic, and I was bulimic for years.
Mm.
And I remember after I stopped uh, throwing up. I stopped being
Yeah.
bulimic. I remember taking the job at Ole Miss. I was coaching basketball. And literally in the first week, our head coach says, we've got somebody on our team who's not cleared for practice.
Mm.
She refuses to go see the trainer. She refuses to do anything, but because she's bulimic. and we want you to talk to her. And I'm just like,
Mm.
and I said, I've got two choices here. I said, I can tell her my story. And I had never told anybody. Like it was a huge source of shame for me at that time, but I had never told anybody. And I was like, ain't this something, right? That I can either tell her the truth or I can continue to hide it. So she and I went on a walk. I told her everything. I said, I get it. I said, and I told her my story, and she looked at me and she said, you were bulimic? And I said, yes. I said, yes, I was. And she went and got help. I ended up in that same situation again when I took my new job, and I can relate to these young girls and say, I get it. Like, you think I don't get it. I get it because I've been there, because I did it, and I did it for years. And I know what the hiding does, and I know what the shame does, and I know how you're feeling. And it was just not only, but the funny thing is that was my healing.
Yeah, it
that
really
was
is.
my healing.
And I'm like, I'm dabbing my eyes because it's bringing tears to my eyes, because I think that is so beautiful. And that is just, it's so powerful when we think about how powerful we are. And there's that old saying, the starfish slinger, right? And if you have not seen comments, like talks about this guy going out and he's like flinging the starfish back, and the guy's like, like, what can that do? Like, there's miles of starfish, he's like, it's the power of one, right? It's, it made a difference to this person, and so I think that is the message that we get to lead with, is like, even if it's just one person, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's powerful.
But you said no wasted experiences. When I'm in the throes of bulimia, all I can see is the shame in myself and my own stuff. But the story's not finished, right? That's a piece. That's just one small moment. And if it hadn't been for that period in my life, then who knows if I would have ever been able to help, not the one, not the two, not the three, not like the multiple girls who I coached in college who were experiencing this. Who knows whether I would have been able to have as big of an impact on them if I had not had that experience myself. So when you talk about no wasted experiences, and that all of these things are blessings and part of our quilt, right? They're not supposed to take us down and damage us or destroy us. They are part of what we experience so that we can help others. I think that is a powerful statement about women in general, because we go through a lot that we don't share.
Yeah. And we have it. And you're right. When we share that story, when we create that impact, it is not only for them, but it's also a reflection back on us. And I think it's a direct reflection on our journey, where we're at, what are we comfortable sharing, and where do we, we give ourselves permission to no longer carry shame and guilt around it,
Yes.
deeper feeling. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. This is fantastic. So, okay. Coach Kathy. Okay.
Yes.
How can we end this call today with a tip, a tool, a strategy, something that can help support all the listeners that are listening today with, something that you've maybe has been helpful to you in your journey, but something that we can share with them to kind of, leave them with a good little nugget here.
Yeah. So, I am a big fan of daily practices. I'm just a huge fan. And, the one thing that I will say is that I can't say that the same daily practices will work for every woman every morning or every person. But what I will say is that my original daily practices were really around self-forgiveness, forgiving myself, and saying, reframing those old stories. I would spend time in the morning kind of journaling around that. I'm a huge fan of meditation. I'm a huge fan of any type of activity that will help shift your mindset and really understanding how amazing and wonderful we are, and how grateful we should be for who we are, and even the challenges that we face, because we're still here. And so whatever these daily morning routines and evening routines are, should be parallel to what you need in your life at that moment. So if I need more confidence, then my morning is like, you are kick-ass. You are a badass. You can do anything you put your mind to. Like I think those things, I say those things for myself. And then I do my gratitude every day, because there's a lot to be grateful for that we take for granted. And then I'll do my meditation, and then I'm up.
Yeah.
But wherever you are, what does that routine look like for you that helps you to make a shift in your mindset and how you feel about yourself so that you can be your most powerful self each day?
Absolutely. I love that. That's such a great way to wrap up today. But let's where can people connect with you, follow you, stalk you? Just kidding. I mean, on the most appropriate stalking, of course.
Of
What I
course.
was doing today when I was stalking you. But how can people connect with you?
Yeah, so my website is coachkathywilson.com. And it's Kathy with a K, so coachkathywilson.com. And the most popular way to find me on social media is the Coach K Dub. So it's the Coach and then letter K DUB. So the Coach K Dub on Instagram. So those are the two easiest, best ways to find me. And if you want to know more about me, you can find it in one of those two areas. So yeah, that's where I
I
am.
appreciate it. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for
Thank you for
having
having
the
me.
courage to come out and share and continue to share your story on so many different levels and platforms. And it's folks like you that is creating this powerful movement of where we're heading to, or into this new place and space where self-love and self-compassion is going to be the new way, right? So
Yes,
thank
I
you.
agree. I agree. Thank you for having me. Thank you so much.
I am so grateful that you joined me for this episode. If you've enjoyed this, then there's just one thing that I would like you to do. Click to subscribe and leave me a rating and review. As my way to thank you, let's connect for a free consultation. Just reach out to me at talkingwithteri, that's TERI.com, to book your time.